Hi there, it's Ruthy here, and I want to talk about something that might shock some of you, but I really feel that it's really important to talk about, and so I'm just going to go for it. I'm sure that some of you will disagree, some of you will just think I'm bonkers, but I'm used to people thinking I'm bonkers anyway, and yeah, I'm just going to share some thoughts. I've got papers galore here of some of my notes, really. So you may have noticed that I've been sharing some stuff that may not be on your radar over the last few weeks and months on Facebook. People like Jack Hibbs or Chuck Missler speaking on things like Nephilim, the giants of the Bible, UFOs and all that sort of stuff. You may have noticed I've been sharing some things. So yeah, you may find what I'm talking about now really weird and wacky. But ever since I was a child, I always had an inquisitive mind, a really inquisitive mind. And I remember my Auntie Sarah, giving me books. I don't know, it was something like, there was about 3 or 4 books, and they were like the 100 strangest stories to read, and crazy stories like spontaneous combustion. And I'd be like, wow, that's really weird. But I'd be wanting to find out, well, how does that work? Like, why would that happen? And why did the Victorians sit in graveyards all night listening for a bell just in case the bell started ringing from a grave? All these kind of weird and wacky stories I found quite fascinating, really. And I also, many years ago, 25 years ago, remembered watching documentaries about Roswell. I remember watching Roswell and the testimonies, the accounts that people shared. And I also remember watching a little bit of the X-Files. Do you remember the X-Files? Back in the 90s or 2000s, used to watch a little bit of that. Not loads, but just a little bit. So I was kind of quite aware, actually, that Roswell had happened and that there were loads of people that were saying this stuff to do with UFOs and spacecraft and all of those things are real. They're out there. But they were always ridiculed. They were laughed at. They were maligned. They were silenced. And those high up in security, etc., they had to sign documents to keep silent. But you may or may not be aware that I think it was during COVID time, that they declassified stuff that's been going on for the last few decades to do with UFOs and alien sightings and what's out there. That was all declassified, and there were congressional hearings. So there were top CIA, top Navy pilots, people up in the Pentagon, all of these really highly professional people who had got, years of experience behind them, very well respected in their field. They came before Congress, I think it's about 10, 11 months ago, to give testimony, to share what they had seen, what they'd experienced. And you can find it on YouTube easily. If you put in congressional hearings and UFOs, you'll find it. They're over 2 hours long, actually, and you'll find it quite illuminating because these are highly respected men and women, I think. I think there was one of the women was chairing it, if I remember rightly. So I'm going to share some of the links below as well, if I can figure out how to do it on Facebook. But, for example, they have said, so the fastest planes that we have in aircraft, the fastest planes we have do 3,200 miles per hour. These top pilots have witnessed craft doing 13,500 miles per hour and then just doing a right-hand turn or doing a left-hand turn, and saying that that is physically not possible. That is not possible with physics. So one of them explained it that if you were traveling in a 3,200 mile per hour plane and you wanted to turn right, he said it would take you almost a whole state to do the turn, because you can't just turn right. You have to do a long, same as in a car as well, isn't it? But they've witnessed this stuff. They've also witnessed these craft at incredible speed going into the ocean and not even a ripple. And it's filmed, and they've testified to this to Congress. There are loads of things that they talk about. There are loads of things that they have seen. And so I've been saying, and I've been asking the Lord, and I've been praying, like, what is going on, Lord? What is going on? I've seen too many of these people to just say, you're idiots, you're crazy, you're mad. So I've been like, what's the truth, Lord? What is going on? I remember probably 20 years ago sitting with my pastor, and he was so patient with me. I used to go and sit up in his office at the Baptist church, and I used to say to him, what's the crack with UFOs? And what's the crack with these alien sightings and abductations, isn't it? Abductations. I remember him talking with him and just sharing with him, like, what is the crack with all of this? Is this for real? Because when I look at the Bible, I can't really see the answers, really. That's what I was saying 20 years ago. But I do want to say at this point that actually, for me, I really do believe the Bible. I believe, I've got it here, I've got one of them here. I really believe that the Bible is a historical account. There's tons of archaeology stuff in it. There's obviously stories, romance, poetry, psalms. Like, there's just incredible stuff in here. But I also really believe that historically is accurate. I love watching archaeology programs. And so I love learning about just how archaeology is being found all the time that backs up. But I also believe what's going to be coming. So we call that prophecy when you talk about what's going to be coming, what's going to be happening in the world before Jesus comes back again. I totally believe this book for that. And so one of the things that Jesus says is that before he comes back, obviously evil and wickedness is going to get worse and worse and worse. And that also deception is going to get worse. There's going to be some big deception. And quite frankly, I see that when I look at world governments and international corporations and institutions. I see that deception getting stronger and stronger. But I do believe that the Bible's got the answers. I believe that the Bible is actually outside of time. And I believe that when we look at scriptures and when we look at Bible verses, you can see that it was relevant and it was true for 4,000 years ago. And it was true for 2,000 years ago. And I believe that currently what's going on and what's going to happen. And interestingly, it says in Isaiah 46, remember the things of old. And also says in 2 Timothy, all scripture is inspired by God. So, if people are saying and testifying in front of a world audience as well as Congress that they are witnessing and seeing things which does not tie in with the physics of our world, what is going on? Thousands are now saying we are not alone. We're not alone. Well, do you know what, guys? I don't think we've ever been alone. We've never been alone, because we've always had God the Creator, and we've had the angelic host. But we've also had, do you remember the story about Jesus saying that he saw Satan thrown out of heaven with the fallen angels. And so I do believe that there is a spiritual realm, that there is an angelic host, and then there are the fallen ones. And I also believe that the fallen ones did some horrendous stuff, which I'm going to talk about later, but also there are demons. And it's not a very nice thing to talk about, but I mean, my goodness, there's enough horrific films out there. Horrific films that even our young people are watching, which are opening doors. Really awful films like The Exorcist and Rosemary's Baby and The Amityville Horror, and all of these films which, quite frankly, are so evil and actually open doors. So I'm going to say right now, for those who do not know, that I've been involved in what we call deliverance ministry or exorcisms. I've been doing that for, I don't know, 15 years now. Started seeing some horrendous spiritual stuff in Africa, but also, I'm just going to lay it out on the table now, I had horrific stuff in me. And so I can tell you firsthand that I had to have exorcisms or deliverance. And the transformation in my mind and in my character was just incredibly. I mean, if you were to talk to my Sarah Jane and Mart's, then they will tell you how horrific I was. Even the dog, bless his heart, was pretty freaked out with some of the things that were going on. So, yeah, the stuff is for real. There is angels and there are demons. And, I mean, I'll just share one thing else. So I've shared something about me personally and what happened to me. But also, when I was in Africa, we had witch doctors trying to take our lives, curse us to death. But I remember physically being in a prayer meeting with other Christians and literally seeing a Christian being lifted off the ground and thrown about 6 to 8 feet away by invisible force. I witnessed her being picked up and thrown. So the spiritual realm is real. So how does this tie in with UFOs and aliens and all of that stuff? How does it tie in? Okay, so there's something that Jesus says that I think is really key. He says, as in the days of Noah, so it will be when the Son of Man returns. So many years ago, I remember really feeling strongly, I want to understand the Bible in a deeper way. And I really want to understand, what was it like in the days of Noah? What the heck was going on? What was happening then that's going to be happening now before he comes back? So there's a few things that I want to pull out, really. In Genesis 3, after the fall of man, so you know the Adam and Eve story, Eve takes from the apple, Adam has some after, and then the curse comes. Listen to this. This is what the Lord God says to the snake, Satan. Because you've done this, tempting man, cursed are you above all livestock and all wild animals. You will crawl on your belly, you will eat dust, and all the days of your life. I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your offspring and hers. Why would he say to Satan, he will put enmity between Satan's offspring and the woman's offspring? When you go over to Genesis 6, there's some really interesting stuff here. Now, today, I'm literally just going to do an overview on all of this. I'm not going to do the really deep study of the Hebrew. Some of it I'll pull out, but basically this is just to give you an overview of kind of what's happening today. And I will put links in to people like Chuck Missler who do such fantastic, deeper studies on the word. And yeah, so it says here in Genesis 6, when human beings began to increase in the number on the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of human were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit will not contend with them forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. So the Nephil, meaning giants. Well, actually, let's go back a scripture. The sons of God, the angelic lot, the ones that actually started messing around with humankind, the fallen ones, they created some sort of hybrid somehow, and I don't understand all of this, but I do believe that they messed around with women, and the Nephilim came about, the giants of old. And the giants were doing some pretty horrific stuff, which is why God sent the flood. And interestingly, when we go to this bit, Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time. When you look at that in the Hebrew, perfect. His DNA hadn't been messed around with. Now, I'm going to say right now, I totally believe that DNA had been messed around. Somehow, the spiritual beings messing around with humans messed up DNA. And I believe that Noah and his family were safe because his DNA was clean. He was perfect in his generations, the word says. So that's interesting, isn't it? I'm now saying that I totally believe that there were giants on the earth. And actually, if you go to different places around the world, Israel, I think Sardinia, places in America, places in South America, Turkey, there are places all over the world where there is evidence for giants. If you go to museums, there is evidence of giant spears, giant armour. There is all sorts of evidence out there, giant bones that have been found. Actually, in some places, evidence was taken to the Smithsonian and then the information was deliberately suppressed. I'll say that again. Information has been deliberately suppressed. So let me go on to the next bit. Back in, I think it was 2008, that's when God started speaking to me and saying, I want you to find out more. I want you to understand more about the Nephilim, the giants, what was happening in the earth in those days. I want you to understand, some of those things. And I want to say at this point that if you would like the Bible study that I've got on it, please message me and I'll happily email it over to you. And if you want to meet up or if you want to talk with me about it, then please do. I'm totally happy to talk. So just let me know. So do you remember the childhood story, David and Goliath? David, the little boy who got his sling and stones and threw it at that giant called Goliath. Goliath had giant brothers, but do you know what? There were loads of giants in the land of Israel. And there were actually, in my deeper Bible study, there was about 31, 32. But I've pulled out some of them. So Goliath was a Philistine. You probably might remember that name, the Philistine. You might have heard the word Rephaim, but also there were giant tribes like Arba, Zizim, Imim, and Anakim. And the Bible talks about these giants being so ferocious. Imim actually means terrorizing ones. Those giants in the land were doing some really sick stuff. And again, I'm going to just say one thing that they did. Child sacrifice was run of the mill. There are loads more things I could tell you, but just to say, child sacrifice was one of the things that they were doing. And that is why I believe when God said to the Israelites, when you go into the land of Israel, wipe them out, completely wipe out, because what those giant tribes were doing was so evil, was so sick. It talks about in the Old Testament, it talks about giants with 6 fingers and 6 toes. It talks about how tall they were. It talks about how big the one man's bed was. And I remember years ago, the very first time I was in Israel, being up on the Golan Heights for a week. I was down in Jerusalem for a week and then the Golan Heights for a week. And I remember finding out that there was the equivalent of Stonehenge, but not as, intact as Stonehenge is. But it was up on the Golan Heights. But because I'm in a wheelchair, I can't get there. But reading that in these museums in Israel, they've got the remains of these giants. Isn't it interesting that when you go to ancient civilizations and ancient history, there is so much talk about giants and gods being half man, half god, sometimes half man, half animal. When you look at ancient Norse history, Sumerian history, Greek and Roman mythology, it's everywhere. Absolutely everything, everywhere. I personally believe that's because of the fallen angels and what they did in the earth. So it says in the last days there's going to be dreadful deception and it's going to get worse. How does this tie in with now? So if there is a spiritual realm, and if there are fallen angels or demons, is it possible? Because Jesus says that the enemy, Satan, has got control over the heavens and that he can make himself look like an angel of light. He can manifest in different ways. He can change forms, and so can the demons. Seen that enough as well in Africa. Is it possible that the reason that we're having such an increase in UFO sightings, in people talking about aliens coming, in people talking about days going missing because they've been abducted and them having the most horrific wounds on their body and things that can't be explained? Is it possible that this stuff is ramping up because we're living in the last days and that deception will get worse and worse? Maybe this is just too crazy for you right now, but I would respectfully ask you to search out more and look at, even if you don't want to listen to a Christian teacher like Chuck Missler or Rob Skiba or Jack Hibbs or any of the other great Bible teachers, even if you don't want to listen to that, look up Congress, look up some of these fighter pilots, top CIA guys who have left CIA, that were CIA, and people that work for Pentagon, yeah, that's it. Look it up. It's there. It's there for us to just be aware of. I personally believe that we need to be wise up to what's going on. I really do. I just think, that saying, ignorance is bliss. Oh my goodness. We cannot be ignorant of these things. We need to be wise up to these things. Okay, I'm just going to just share a little bit more about some of the other notes that I thought were quite important to share, really. I've shared about that, really. So, looking at elsewhere in the world, not just Israel. So, one of the most fascinating cases of giants in US history are the Smithsonian giants. During the genocidal conquest of the indigenous peoples of North America, the United States Cavalry hired mercenaries, encountered giants living among the tribes, and engaged in direct combat with them. The mindset used to justify the wholesale slaughter of many and force the relocation of the rest of these tribes were that they were subhuman, their darker skin being a key to this gross misconception. The giants they encountered and killed were red-headed with white skin. Fearing a backlash from the American people for killing whites, giants or not, the government ordered that all bodies of these giants be retrieved and shipped to the Smithsonian Institute to hide the damaging evidence. We have no idea if these bodies were ever disposed of, but there is sufficient evidence available from the Smithsonian officials and documentation of the time to believe this actually occurred. Bones of giants have been uncovered in the United States in New York, California, Ohio, Tennessee, Illinois, Virginia, West Virginia, Wisconsin, there's more. Now, there was something I was going to share about this. Not that bit. The legends of early North American tribes are rich with stories of giants, including the Sioux Indians, who told about giants that run down the buffalo. Yeah. Now, also, that reminds me, so Patagonia, which is way down in South America, I only found this out a few months ago. Patagonia is called Patagonia, meaning land of the giants, land of the big feet. And the first explorers that went down to Patagonia talked about the giants that they saw in the land. And if you were to look at ancient maps of Patagonia, you'll see pictures of man standing next to a giant, but literally only reaching his waist. Please do your research. There is so much stuff out there. Evidence all over the place. And I'm finding out more and more as time goes on. Also talks about the Greeks having loads of their share of giants in their legends. I don't recognise actually any of these names really. Goodness, Agrius, Alcyoneus, Alios. I don't know if I'm going to carry on with these names because they're really hard. Oh, Phoebe's all right. Thoas, Furius, Thea, Tessis. Giants playing an integral role in the lore of the Norse gods, which I've shared already. And many mariners like Christopher Colombo, Ferdinand Magellan, Sir Francis Drake, Sir Thomas Cavendish, etc., all reported encountering giants in the logs of their voyages. 1950, in the Euphrates Valley of southeast Turkey, many tombs containing giants 14 to 16 foot were unearthed. I'd forgotten about that one. So it does sound like from this that I'm talking mainly about giants, but I mean, giants is something that I've just studied a lot in the Bible, and I love it. But I think also it relates to today. So if fallen angels messed around with DNA of humans, creating hybrids, quite frankly, I believe that is happening today. And I know that sounds like a crazy subject, but there are some crazy things happening. So I hope I've given you enough to ponder on, and I hope that I've given you enough information to make you think this deserves deeper study. What does the Bible really say? What is really happening in the world? How does this relate to us here in this time? So I shall leave that with you. And yeah, contact me if you want to. Ask for the Bible study if you want to. And if you want to talk about it, fine. You are really welcome. Bye.